I nominate Angie Tomlin.
Do we have a seconder? Seconder? Yes. Signal seconds. Any other nominations? There are not. Move to vote in favour of. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Can you take the votes online?
Could we have a show of hands on remotely, please, for Angie Tomlin for Vice Chair?
I'm trying, but it's not working.
Okay.
Oh, that's it.
Okay. The next item is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've received apologies from David Salkeld, Councillor James Kearns, North East Lincolnshire Council, and Victor Clark. And I think Chris Miller
Sheila
and Sheila Brooks.
And Nick Tomlin.
And item 4, declarations of interest. Does anybody wish to declare any interest in any items today? And you can always declare an interest later on if we reach an item where you realise you have one. If there are none, I'll move on to public questions. Are there any members of the public present? Do we have members of the, is it possible for members of the public to be present online?
Yes.
But we don't have any, do we? So we can't have any questions, right? Yes. Move on to item 6, retirement of the clerk, Steve Black. Now, Steve retired quite a long time ago now, but it happened in the middle of the outbreak of COVID and also the reorganisation of, or the amalgamation of the two LAFs into one. And I believe in the process, we never got round to thanking Steve, and it would normally be courtesy to thank an outgoing clerk, particularly for the job to be an excellent clerk. He was always on the ball. He always had the papers ready. He was watching for people who were trying to speak when I missed them, reminding me when I forgot things. And I think we should send a formal letter thanking him and wishing him a happy and long retirement, if that was everyone's approval. I'd move on to the business of the day, but before I do that, I want to just set out a bit of a timetable. I normally try to keep these meetings within 2 hours, and we don't have a particularly long agenda today, and I think it would be useful if we gave some proper attention to the less routine items on the agenda. The rights of way improvement plan, I'd like to have a bit of brainstorming amongst us perhaps, and also some thought given for the forward agenda programme so that we can set ourselves some sort of clear idea of doing something constructive over the next year as a forum. So I'll now move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. If anybody, does anybody first of all have any corrections? Anything they think is wrong with the minutes? If not, is it normal for, I can't remember now, move from the chair that we approve them? I'll move from the chair that we approve the minutes. And I'm in your hands now.
I'll propose, Chairman, that they're correct.
Yep. Can I have a vote on that, please? Could those in the chamber show favour? Anyone? Can you get the online ones? I can't see them.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say first of all, is there anyone against? So we probably have some NEMCOM, can we? Yeah, so NEMCOM then. I don't think there's a need. Yeah. And any matters arising, any questions on the minutes now? If anybody has anything they wish to raise at this moment that's not on the agenda. Yes, Chris Miller,
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question to yourself as Chairman. There is an element in the minutes about the Deregulation Act. Would it be appropriate to pick it up here rather than in the item on the Rights of Way Improvement Plan?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear that.
There is an element in the minutes about the Deregulation Act. We did discuss it last time. It's whether it's worthwhile raising the changes here or during the Rights of Way Improvement Plan discussion.
You can raise it now, I think, so split it up a bit and deal it with it now. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. So you'll recall from previous meetings and the update I gave in the last meeting about the Deregulation Act of 2015, which was to bring into force certain elements of the former Countryside and Rights of Way Act 2000, alongside a raft of other new Rights of Way related proposals. The main one of these was the bringing into force of the cut-off date for the definitive map and statement, which was outlined to be the 1st of January 2026. The government has now indicated that it's their intention not to bring that section into force at all, and that the whole process will be not repealed because it will remain in the Countryside and Rights of Way Act, and it could come up again at a future date, obviously, but this current government has no intention of bringing it into force. What they have also said is that they will still intend to bring into force the elements regarding the right to apply for public path orders for creations and extinguishments and diversions, and the changes to the available charging regimes that local authorities are allowed to put to that sort of work, which would help unstifle, if that's a word, probably isn't, but would help the flow of cases of public path order work. There are some difficulties in this as far as we can see as professionals. The main one being when we're not as yet sure, because we've had nothing other than what I've just told you there from DEFRA. We're not entirely sure how they intend to divorce certain sections of the work that they've done within the Deregulation Act. For example, the amendments to the schedules of the Wildlife and Countryside Act, which are now published in law under that the deregulation work, how they're going to divorce certain parts of that to not bring those bits into force, but bring into force other elements which they hope to bring in, such as the ability for authorities to deal with irrelevant objections, or the removal of the strictures of advertising in the press, and the ability to deal with anomalous issues in a streamlined fashion. We are as yet still awaiting information from the government through DEFRA as to how they believe they're going to be able to do that. I had a discussion with someone who used to head up the open spaces and commons section of DEFRA, and he couldn't see how they were going to do it. So that worried us slightly, and we intend to write to the minister to see what they have to say. But other than that, I don't have any further news other than to say that the 2026 cut-off date would appear to have been abandoned for now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So if there are no more questions on the minutes, I'll move to item 8, English Coast Path Update, which is Chris again is going to give us a report.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just a brief update. As you'll be aware, we have an open section between Skegness and Mablethorpe, which is already established and signed up. In the past couple of weeks, we've had notification from DEFRA and Natural England that the Secretary of State has approved 3 of the 4 sections north of Mablethorpe to the Humber Bridge. The only section that remains to be approved, and we expect that to be imminent anyway, is the section around Don and Nook, where there is where the sole objection to that whole stretch was located. There has been a site visit by the inspector charged with reviewing that with Natural England and a colleague of mine, and with the landowner, and it would appear that that objection has been dealt with. It's been resolved. So we expect that the report for that particular section of the route between Mablethorpe and the Humber Bridge will be before the Secretary of State shortly, just to square that off. Once we have that, we'll then start moving into the establishment phase for that stretch in terms of contracting for the signage and any other infrastructure that needs to be put in place. For the section from Sutton Bridge to Skegness, we haven't had an announcement yet on the route. As you'll be aware, the report for that was made many months ago now, and there was 2 outstanding objections which needed to be reviewed. The inspectorate has reviewed them, and we are awaiting the confirmation from the Secretary of State. We believe that to be imminent within the next month or so. So at the same time as doing the Mablethorpe to Humber stretch, we'll be looking at doing the Sutton Bridge to Skegness establishment works at the same time. That there is a slight difficulty in the southern stretch, because obviously our time frames will have to be much more shaped by the natural environment needs of the area, being in a very regulated part of the world, particularly around Gibraltar Point. We have a large bridge over the river Steeping that requires quite a lot of refurbishment to bring it up into public usage to enable the connectivity of the path. But we'll obviously be restricted a little bit about what time of year we can undertake those works, so it might not be quite as seamless. We might have to get on with other bits first and come back to that when we can. Many thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Then move on to item 9. I'm just. Oh, sorry. I'm forgetting. Sandra. Yes. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Before we just go on a bit, I'd explain, in case you haven't already realised, those of you on Zoom, I actually cannot see you the way this meeting has been set up. So Robert the clerk can, and so there's a little bit of to and fro between me and him to make sure everybody is able to speak. So over to Sandra.
I think you're on mute still, Sandra.
Sorry. Quick query. The route from Mablethorpe going north, including Donanook, that's all either Natural England land or Wildlife Trust mixture all the way down along the Thorpe Soxby Triple SI.
Yes. What's your question, Sandra?
Hang on, I ain't got there yet.
Oh, you're just making right.
Am I right in thinking that landowners are responsible for looking after the route once it's established? And if so, do those 2 owners, the Wildlife Trust and Natural England, do they have to be responsible as well?
It's actually the management of the trail actually is devolved from Natural England down to the local authorities, and we will be managing it in partnership. So the 3 tier 1 authorities of North East Lincolnshire, North Lincolnshire, and ourselves at the Lincolnshire County Council, along with other stakeholders such as the district councils, the MOD, the National Trust, and so on, we'll be looking at managing the path through partnership work. That's established across the National Trails family. That's no different to the Pennine Way and how that operates. And we will be seeking the employment of a National Trail officer to coordinate that in due course. So landowners obviously have responsibilities, but it's still the authorities that sort of own the responsibility for management and maintenance of the coast path as part of the National Trails family.
Yeah, so effectively the residents of Lincolnshire do bear some of the costs then. Thank you.
Well, the funding element of it is so there is a funding formula for National Trails. That's all National Trails across the whole family, both the coast path and all the inland ones. And there is a funding formula that goes with that Natural England have granted aid to the tune of 75% of the cost. So the partners contribute 25%, and Natural England provide the other 75% of the management costs per annum.
Okay, does that answer your question, Sandra?
Yeah, thank you. And I apologise because I don't know why this doesn't usually happen, but I've got a bad network quality and I keep losing the meeting temporarily.
Right.
Keeps happening, so I do apologise. If I disappear altogether, that's why.
Okay, there's John Fawns waiting to speak. John?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, my video doesn't seem to want to work for some reason, but never mind. I was just asking, I'm very keen on the path, but I'm just concerned about people. Where do they park and toilets? I'm just concerned that people will park near to the path and have a walk up and down it, and it'll be blocking lanes and things like that. So I just wondered if there was any thoughts about parking and toilets going longer term.
Okay, Chris.
Thank you, John. Yeah, there are a number of car parking points already. We're not planning on creating any more. There's quite a strong number as it goes all the way through, certainly from Gibraltar Point northwards, less so round the Wash down to Boston and then round to Sutton Bridge. But we do think that it won't cause a particular problem on local lanes in that regard. As in terms of public conveniences, again, we're not in a position to construct more at this current moment in time and manage more facilities. We have just recently refurbished a facility at Huttoft, and there are facilities as you go along the coast. Obviously, once it gets a little bit wilder north of Mablethorpe and north of that part of the county, it becomes a little bit more few and far between. But certainly on the more populated parts of the coast, there's ample opportunities.
Is there anyone else waiting to speak? No. Okay, then first of all, does that answer your question, John?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Then if there are no more questions, we'll move on to the County Council Rights of Way Improvement Plan. I'm going to ask Chris Miller, first of all, to just fill in the background to why this exists, its legislative background, for those of you who are not familiar with it or new to it.
Thank you, Chairman. So the rights of way improvement plans were came out of the Countryside and Rights of Way Act 2000, which I mentioned earlier, and it was a duty upon all local access authorities to create a plan to show how they are going to look after their network of public rights of way, with some various regulations around how that should look. They had to be in place by the year 2007, and they have to be reviewed periodically. So for Lincolnshire, we published ours back in 2007, in November 2007. And that was following a period of assessments. We did a user assessment. We went and talked to lots of different user groups, spoke with the local access forum on a couple of occasions, or a number of occasions, and we also did sort of an audit of what we had as an authority in terms of our rights of way and access network. Following that, we published the plan, and for Lincolnshire, ours is based on sort of 4 columns really. We have a core priorities area, and then we have the columns of sustainable travel, tourism, the economy, and social value. And so we then had to publish a list of actions that we intend to undertake over the period of the plan about how we're going to operate that, and then how we're going to improve the rights of way network as we go along. There was no set formula for rights of way, and Natural England didn't give us authorities a steer as to it must look like this or it must look like that. So you will find different styles of rights of way across the rights of way improvement plans across the country. Ours is quite a detailed one. We don't go as far as trying to have a plan for every individual right of way, because with the amount we've got, it would just be an enormous tome. So we have to work on some. We look at the principles of how we're going to manage. For example, one of the more obvious ones is we will seek wherever possible to reduce the number of styles across the network to aid with accessibility. So it's a fairly common one. I think you'll find that in most rights of way improvement plans. And we would always look to seek better connectivity for the network, whether that would be through creation work or through diversions when we're discussing those with landowners. Taking opportunities to exploit is probably too strong a word, but the potential of the network for tourism around tourism centres. So if we could link paths through diversions, or if they were already in existence, to tourism centres or tourism facilities. So you think about out in the East Coast and the work that we've been doing in the coastal country park area. a lot of that is underpinned by the priorities we put into the rights of way improvement plan to make sure that we have a connected, usable network. The network that was there was based on old drainage patterns and is, was obviously an historic network, and it wasn't quite matching with the current day-to-day need of the area in terms of getting people from some of the caravan sites out onto the coast. And obviously with the coast path to manage now as well, there's going to be a little bit of emphasis on that. So as I say, these have to be reviewed periodically. We last reviewed ours in 2012, so it is overdue now by a couple of years. But we're not alone in that as authorities. I think this was recognition of some of the austerity measures that hit us back in the sort of like 2010 to 2014, 15. But it is something we're conscious that we have to look at now. So we are going to start beginning the process in the next few months of starting to establish some of that engagement work again. We probably won't go to the lengths we went to last time because it was an extremely costly process. I think we spent about £10,000 just on the engagement work and consultancy and so on. And I don't think there's an appetite for replicating that this time around. And obviously we've still got quite a lot of that analysis we can still draw on that's still relevant even all these years later. But we do still need to talk to the user groups and other interested parties, landowning groups and so on, just to make sure that we're still, going to be writing the new rope in the in the correct frames really for everybody, so that as best we can, everybody's benefiting. That's the basic background, Chairman. If you want to proceed from there.
Yes, first of all, at the time it was first prepared, I was I was already on the LAF, and so I was aware of the engagement with the LAF. I have to say the LAF did not actually have a great deal of input. The LAF appointed one representative on a consultative body, which had many other people on it, so it was fairly indirect and a minority input. It was, as Chris said, there was no set formula set in the Act or by the government, and different authorities around the country had a very wide range of different approaches to it. At one end of the spectrum, there were those who prepared what I would call an action plan, or even beyond that, actually a program of work, and they identified specific rights of way that they wanted to improve or specific gaps in the network that they intended to fill. And so it was very much very specific. At the other end of the spectrum, they were simply policies, and often no more than aspirations. And I would put Lincolnshire's myself, that's my personal view, in that sort of a line. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think we have to ask in these times of well, we've had a number of years of very severe limits on local government spending, and given the economic situation and the other things going on in Europe at the moment, that does not seem very likely to change in the immediate future. And I wonder, what is the point? I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean we have to say what the point should be, rather than in a sort of sneering, what's the point of it? In a right-of-way improvement plan, that what kind of right-of-way improvement plan can make a difference, can lead to things being done differently to the way they would be done. Now, if the rights-of-way section of the County Council is simply firefighting, it's simply responding to paths that are out of repair, it's just trying to keep up with the maintenance as best it can on the paths that most need maintenance and are most wanted people to be used, I don't know that a rights-of-way improvement plan is going to make very much difference. And if it's going to cost a lot of money, when we're constantly being told how little money you have, we need to ask these basic questions in framing what sort of plan it's going to be, what's its scope going to be, etc. Chris is wanting to reply to that, but I would like other people to have an input. But Chris, if you want to quickly.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just to reflect on the point you were making there about the changing circumstances we will probably be finding ourselves in over the next few financial years, in that we're unlikely to see a massive amount of growth available for the rights of way work. What we need to do and strive to do is ensure that we're delivering in other ways, that we're, for example, through the development work, building and so on, and making sure that we get the best out of what other people can provide as a benefit as part of their own aims and ambitions. So, for example, developers building 400 houses. Well, let's make sure that we're pouring some money back to improve the network in that local area, because clearly it's going to be used by the people who live there. We need to be stronger in our thinking and use our rights of way improvement plan to demonstrate to others what we desire out of the network, even if we're not always able to deliver that ourselves.
Does anyone, Angie Tomlin, want to speak?
Yes, please. I'd like to say, when the rights of way improvement plan does come up for review, would it be possible at all to involve anybody from the equestrian community? Because we have access to grants and things like that that are not council grants and things like that for resurfacing equestrian rights of way, which obviously us as equestrians benefit from, but then so do other users. So it wouldn't cost you anything to speak to us as a community, and we'd be very happy to point the local authority in the direction of where we can offer, various charities around the country that do help us.
Thank you. Did you want to reply to that, Chris? Or not?
No, absolutely. I mean, when we're doing our rights of way improvement plan, we don't limit ourselves to the walking fraternity. It's all rights of way and all users, whether that be equestrians, the ridden horse, the driven horse, motor vehicle users as well, for the routes that they have an ability to be able to use. So we have to look at it completely in the round. Again, one of the other schemes that we delivered on the last rights of way improvement plan was the Lindsay Trail, which is the carriage driving route in the north of the county through the Wold. So it's something we're conscious of. We're aware of the paucity of bridleways in certain parts of the county. So in the rights of way improvement plan, we will be looking at assessing that and making sure that if we can make gains in terms of availability and connectivity of those networks, then that's what we'll be striving and looking to do. As part of the engagement work, we would always engage with all the user groups, all the equestrian groups. I think last time round we went to local state. We got a list of where all the stables were and certain equine centres, and approached them directly as well. So it isn't something we will overlook.
Is anyone else wanting to speak? Nope. I'm going to make a suggestion. Oh, sorry, Councillor Carrington.
Thank you, Chairman. I was unable to attend the last meeting, so just introduce myself.
Please do. Yes.
I am the chairman of the subcommittee which deals with public rights of way here at Lincolnshire County Council. You asked, I think, an incredibly important question, which is basically why we're here. What are we doing as far as this review is concerned? And I think that's absolutely the right question to put before we go down it. My take, is it's something I've had the opportunity of discussing at some length with Chris, is that it goes back to those four pillars that he talked about. We are talking here more than just about rural access, although that is in and of itself incredibly important. We're also talking about more than maintenance. I think the answer to your question is almost the map. And if you look at a map of our public rights of way, the way I've described it in the past is it's somebody's picked up a whole bunch of twigs and thrown it down on a map. And there are lots of little public rights of way all over the shop. And that I choose those words intentionally. And too often they don't join up. Each and every one has a historical reason for being there, and each and every one is worth fighting to protect and defend. But I think we've got in those four principles, those four pillars that Chris talked about, we've got a sort of a strategic thrust behind what we're doing to get more joined up footways. And when I say footways, we include the equestrians that I've heard we had somebody commenting on online. And also, I think we have to bear in mind that the totality of active travel. So we should be looking at making sure that there is, if not shared space, at least a joining up between a network for footways, a network for equestrians, and the cycling network. In other words, active travel as a totality. I think that's incredibly important. I think those principles are established already. So I would hope this forum would agree that it is right that we should evolve rather than, you know, revolution, throw the whole thing away and start over. But we do need, I think, to get more joining up. And I just chuck into that, and it's a professional involvement of mine, the whole business of planning, town and country planning, where I talk about there. Even where there are not formal footpaths or bridleways or other public rights of way, the planning system can be incredibly useful in encouraging active travel and indeed providing benefits to existing footways which are close. I'll give you an example, if I may, Chairman, something I've had a professional involvement in. A development in a large popular village, 2 nationally significant public rights of way, one a Sustrans route, one a named long distance walk, the Viking Way as it happens, passed within half a mile of a major new housing development. Thanks to the intervention of the County Council's officers, actually the highways team who deal with local planners, they said, well, look, could we tweak this development at not very much cost, just to improve the linkages between those 2 strategic points? Suggestion came from the County Council, good suggestion. I haven't thought of it, and I'm a bit ashamed of that, given the role I play here. But nevertheless, that will be done. That is now embedded in the plan. So both in terms of formal situations where there is a public right of way to be protected or maintained or created in new development, and informally, if we're alert and aware, as our highways colleagues were very much on the ball, that can also help us make do more joined up thinking that produces a more joined up network.
I'm going to carry on talking about this because I want it to be discussion, but I just explain, I feel a bit of a disadvantage because I'm sitting up here in the high chair of the chairman's, and it isn't conducive to the right sort of frame of mind. I'm kind of conducting a formal meeting when what I want here is an honest discussion and ideas for a bit. And I'm going to throw in my bit here, and I agree with most of what you say. I think all of what you say. And there's a list of things that I think about it. First of all, what you've described is improving the network. It is an improvement plan, a plan on a map, which is, I think, what we need, rather than these sort of vague aspirations about. There are, the kind of phrases that just sort of say, "Oh, we'll seek to make things better." It's when they boil down to it. When you talk about the scattered twigs on the map, I think it's important to remember that a lot of those joins got up can be accomplished by ordinary roads, and in Lincolnshire, quite a lot of our ordinary roads are very quiet, and a lot of them have very broad verges, and it's inevitable in any rights-of-way system people have to walk along the road, so we mustn't forget to include those in the thinking of the network, especially if there's an opportunity to have, say, a bridleway along a broad verge or something like that. Another thing is filling in the gaps. That ties in with the question of the lost ways, which Chris has referred to with this cut-off date. And one of the things that's happened separately we need to consider, I think, is this approach of this cut-off date stimulated the Ramblers, the British Horse Society, the Open Space Society, to really get organised about putting in applications for missing rights of way, and that's going to be a big administrative problem for the council because it's already got an enormous backlog of processing these, and to try and have some system whereby those are processed in a beneficial way, looking for the ones which will improve the network by filling in gaps or just making completely new routes, and obviously not the ones where they go through where there's now a new housing estate, because the housing estate was put there after the house was, so to speak, lost. On planning, the legislation gives the local access forums the brief of advising all the local authorities within their area, although it has to be administered by the county council. or the county councils where there is one, or the unitary authorities, we are supposed to be advising the district council planning authorities, and we have tried to engage with them, and Chris, to his credit, has tried to help with this, and it's been very, very difficult. And we really find that getting the actual planning officers to see things from the point of view of saying, well, when you're considering a planning application for a housing estate, let's make it have foot connectivity, let's make it have foot greenways. There's lots in the planning guidance from the government that says the right things. And I and one of Chris's team, who's now left, were invited to talk to one of the planning authorities. I won't say which one, and they did at least engage with us and want to hear what we had to say. But what we found was that the officers were very anxious to ask questions, but they were all framed in terms of how do we avoid getting the wrong side of the law, which is, I mean, very understandable and very proper of them. But there was no, this is my personal opinion, there was no imagination, no excitement at the opportunity of being able to do things better. And perhaps this is a problem of the planning system now. It's been reduced to processing planning applications for some authorities, but some might be better than others. But to try and fire what you were saying, some sort of excitement about saying, hey, we've got an opportunity in this planning, in this development, to do something about access to the countryside, access to exercise, fresh air, getting out. We need to encourage that. It's not entirely, it is there in places, but we need to get more of it. So I've talked long enough now myself. Sid.
Thank you, Chairman. I deal with 3 different authorities, North Lincs, North East Lincs and Lincolnshire County Council, and they all have a different approach on this. And I find it very, very difficult to get information. I have to say Lincolnshire County Council are quite good. They send information through almost daily to the point that I get snowed under with it. But at least they are sending information through on developments and things.
Sorry,
like that.
which authority did you say?
Lincolnshire County Council, there's West Lindsey and East Lindsey. I do get information from them. But I also have North Lincolnshire in my area and North East Links. But I find they all have a different approach, and some are very, very helpful, some aren't so helpful. But there's very little consultation with things. It's more a matter of they are showing me what they're going to do rather than asking for, some input, really.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd mention the fact that I agree with what you said. They vary a lot from authority to authority. In my little mention on solar panels later, this will come out.
Yeah.
All right. That's all for now. Thanks.
I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name.
Erica Spurrier.
Erica, yes, please.
Quickly, just sort of to address, you said that the footpaths are sometimes drop like twigs and.
Erica, could you talk into the microphone?
Scattered slightly, sorry. I walk quite a lot on several different areas around and about Metheringham, and I now live in Digby. I used to live in Blackney. I tend to go back to Blackney almost on a daily basis and park in the car park there at Blackney Walks, because I can walk in circles or squares back to my car. And the reason that is made easier is because the Blackney estate has created some permissive footpaths which link together the existing footpath network in that area. And I wondered if it's possible to work with other landowners to try and encourage some more permissive footpaths to link other footpaths together, so dog walkers or ramblers, etc., can walk in a circle rather than just sort of walking, getting to the end of the footpath and suddenly thinking, well, that track's not a footpath, I'm not really allowed onto it, I can't join up with that track, so I'm going to have to walk back. if we are trying to encourage the general public to become more active, to get fresh air, to have healthier lifestyles, to maybe try and get landowners on board to perhaps create a few more just to join the dots might make sense.
Thank you. And Angela Tomlin, I gather, is trying to speak. Angela?
Yes, I wanted to go back a little way to where we were talking about unjoined up networks. There's a local riding school not too far away from me, and as with my other hat on, I was asked to put in a request to the county council because they have a bridleway which is really close to them, which would be absolutely perfect for them taking their young riders out and their less experienced people out, and would help them join up a route. So I put the request in, as did several other people, to the council. But it turns out that on the definitive map, and this I've found this on a number of occasions over the last few years, on the definitive map, the bridleway shows as starting about 4 or 5 foot off the road. So that 4 or 5 foot, you're not allowed to cross it. And because of that, the council said that they wouldn't even look at it. And anyway, it wasn't very important because it was one of their downgraded routes. And this is the sort of thing we get all the time. So therefore, it makes the constant striving to, as everybody else has said, to join the routes up together absolutely soul destroying after a while, because you know you're going to put your request in and you know that the answer that comes back every time is no, we can't do that one, that's not important. This particular bridleway has had an illegal obstruction on it for years, which the landowner put there because he didn't want anybody to use the bridleway. And I'm sure the fact that it's 5 foot off the little rural road is an anomaly, because no bridleway started 5 foot off a road. You know, cart horses and people who use bridleways could very rarely jump 5 foot off the road to get onto the next track they needed. So I think there is an attitude that, oh, it's just in the countryside, it doesn't matter, let's not bother about it. And we do find that quite stressful when we're trying really hard to join up all the routes that are actually already there and need very little work to make them accessible. Didn't need resurfacing, it needed the illegal obstruction clearing and the map sorting out so that it was starting on the roadside.
Yeah,
I don't know what the answer is, but that's the situation that we all find ourselves in.
Thank you very much for that, Angela. I'll invite the council officer to respond to that, but just to clarify the point here. So on the definitive map, as you say, there's a 5 foot gap. I have to say that's an extraordinarily small one. As Chris Miller will know, there's a lot of gaps in the network where, for example, on the definitive map, the right of way reaches a field gate, say, that has a throat to it, and it's maybe 20 yards or 50 yards off the end of there's a stub end of a
maybe 5 foot's a bit a bit wrong. It looked tiny.
I'm just wondering if what we've got here is a kind of vicious circle where, because it's not available as a through route because of a gap, it's been downgraded in its importance. And then when you've said, can we have this made good, an obstruction somewhere else repaired somewhere, I said, well, because it's classified as one of low importance because it can't be made into a through route, you've got a sort of vicious circle that somebody is saying, well, we're not going to bother sorting out this problem because there's another problem. And that problem they're not going to bother sorting out because of the first problem.
And this is exactly why the council has been inundated over the past 2 or 3 years with DMMOs.
Yeah. So,
and it'll continue to be so. We will continue putting the DMMOs in for all of these routes that have basically been locked off from everybody for small anomalous reasons.
Yeah. Can I
but
ask?
Surely there must be an easier way.
Well, I'm going to throw it to the representatives of the council itself here and see if they want to respond to that, and if it's clear what we're talking about there as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I won't deny that there will be routes out on the network where there is a substantial missing link, as we know them, or not to roads, where the notation of the public right of way on the original definitive map from the 50s stops some way short of the road. I would very much suspect 5 foot would be well and truly swallowed up by the tolerances we have to apply to a thick purple pen stroke on a 1 to 10,560 scale map drawn up in the 50s. So I wouldn't have thought it would have been of that magnitude. But certainly, as the chairman mentions, if you get a reasonable distance between from the road, we have to be able to demonstrate that that is exactly where the right of way is. We're not saying there isn't a right of way there. All we can say is it is not recorded as such. If we want to take enforcement action against that, we have to be able to build an evidence case to go to court if we needed to, because the landowner will just push back and say this is not on the definitive map, you have no powers. So it does cause some complications in that regard. We will always strive to do the best we can for those sort of routes, but we do have to, given the limited resources we spoke about earlier, we do have to employ a prioritisation scheme for our rights of way, and we have done for as long as I've worked here in the last 26 years. It has changed a little. It now covers 4 categories, from one priority 1, 2, 3, and 4. With 4s being those that have significant legal or physical barriers, such as an extremely large bridge missing that's going to cost 6 figures to replace. We have to look at the value of doing so against the amount of people that may actually benefit from us undertaking that work. So we have to put in to a degree a cost benefit analysis to every individual path and type of work we might do on it. So unfortunately, yes, there will be those paths that we have assessed as being of lesser value. Interestingly, what you say there about there being a number of riders, in the area, that there might be a stables nearby to a bridleway. I would suggest that's something you might want to pick up with my officers and just suggest that maybe they ought to look at the prioritisation of that path. I don't know the circumstances of that path or where it is to be able to comment.
Yeah, but Chris, can I mean, that's the crux of the problem that we've just heard from Angela, that that has happened, that it has been raised.
Yeah, well,
and the opportunity has been pointed out, and the demand has been pointed out.
We may have had 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6. It depends. I don't know what the issues are. You say it's obstructed by what? If it's somebody's dwelling, then that is extremely time consuming, and it might not be worth the time to.
What seems to me to be coming out of this is that possibly something to be included in the rights of way improvement plan is a system.
Sorry.
is a system for enabling people with the kind of concerns this group of riders has. It sounds as if there's a substantial concern here, to make sure that it gets taken seriously and doesn't fall through, it falls through this, it gets blocked for this there. It never gets, the different concerns never come together to add up to a kind of a flagging it up as something that's an opportunity. But can I ask if Councillor Carrington, did you want to say anything on this?
Chris, did you have a further? Yeah, 2 things really. Firstly, as the only person in the room who actually votes on the county council budget, I am aware of resource constraints, and it's an easy thing to say. It's down to us to make sure that we use resources as well as we can, and if we're not using them optimally, then let's look at that. But there is a very, very limited amount of resource to deal with this issue. And as we've just heard from our online colleague, the DMMOs keep coming in. And that's right that they should. So there is always a kind of a workflow prioritization thing. But I just wanted to tie together the point that we heard online, which is fundamentally maybe about horses. I love the notion of the cart horse jumping with its cart, but we'll park one. And tie that together with the point that was made about circular walks in Blackney. And I think there's a word here that is important going forward, and that's partnership. Fundamentally, statutorily, what we look at are public rights of way, and those have a legal definition. But because of the 4 pillars that we have, we're looking more broadly. We're looking at countryside access, we're looking at well-being in particular, and active movement, be it for leisure or be it non-leisure purposes. So partnerships with local landowners, partnerships with other councils. Public rights of way are county council matter. But for example, in the area you're talking about around Blackney and Metheringham, North Castilian District Council publishes a lot of online and paper leaflets encouraging people to get out. There is a partnership possibility that working with different councils, of working with local landowners. There is a great role here for district and county councillors where anomalies have arisen, like the kind we've heard from our online colleague. The local county councillor, if that person is made aware, can then have a chat with officers. That's what councillors are there for. It's not all just down to officers. Let's remember there are things called councillors. They have work to do. They have a role to play as well. But I think as we embark on this, no, we're not going to spend £6 zillion on formal consultation, but a broadly based cooperative approach, talking to partners who may already have significant knowledge bases, with the guiding principle of joining up the dots, which I think we all in this room and the virtual room believe in. That seems to me to be a productive way forward.
Yeah, but I would suggest that if there's some way the rights of way improvement plan can be used to create that, to create the process by which these dots are joined up. What I was thinking here, not the physical lines on the map, that's the ultimate aim, but to make it more direct, where an opportunity is pointed out here by apparently a group of riders and perhaps others, to say, look, there's a small gap being filled here could make a big difference, because if you've got a small gap in the network that stops perhaps a long right of way not being usable, and of course makes all the links that it makes if it's a vital link, that seems to me a very efficient way of using resources to close a small gap that might be a key to creating a really usable network. Yes, Sid.
Thank you. You just brought up a mention of leaflets being published describing walks and that, but over the last year, several of these leaflets are practically made redundant by the fact that landowners have now said you can't walk this part. It was permissive and we've withdrawn the permission and everything else. Once the county council publishes these walking routes, is there any way of highlighting the fact that there are vulnerable spots on them? It's
we already highlight where routes might be permissive in nature, and that permission may be withdrawn at without any notice. We try and avoid wherever possible these days. I mean, some of the historic ones, certainly back from the sort of early 90s, will still perhaps rely on a couple of permissive routes, but we do very much try and avoid it now. We've been bitten too many times, with exactly the same scenarios you've mentioned there, that the landowners withdrawn the permission and made the path, the network there more complicated to use, and the route you want to use is no longer available. So we wouldn't readily promote routes now that include permissive paths unless we were in the process of trying to gain some final public rights over that rather than permissive rights. If we were engaged in that process, we might do, but it's unlikely. For example, part of what we're doing is the Viking Way project at the moment, which does rely on some permissive rights of way. We're negotiating with landowners to make those permanent, so that we're not reliant on the whims of a landowner as to whether or not they allow something to happen or otherwise.
It was mentioned at the last meeting about Debbie Braun was going to look at the Viking Way in total and come up with possible diversions or alterations. How's that going at the moment?
Yeah, fine. It's a 3-year process, so she's got to walk from Humber to the to Rutland Water, so it's going to take a while. And talking to landowners, negotiating the removal of stiles and replacing them with gates. We've got a couple of big ticket issues, if you like, that will need some considerable sorting out. The crossing at the A46 bypass of Caister is quite a dangerous crossing. There's another one on the A52 at Sedgebrook which requires some looking at. But yeah, she's working her way down. I think last time I spoke to her, she was sort of around the Lincoln area. And yeah, we're looking at opportunities for the Viking Way to, as I say, lose some of the permissive nature of the paths and get them permanent, but also looking at where actually with a little bit of different thinking, we could try and get a different route which has better views or has less structures to climb over, and we've got a style-free route or things like that. And then also creating sort of circulars. For example, Market Rasen is completely bypassed by the Viking Way, but yet there are facilities in Market Rasen that might be useful for those who are trying to do a longer stretches and they might want to stay in Market Rasen for a night. So looking at publishing routes that get you into sort of towns that are nearby as well. So it's quite a big project, but yeah, it's coming on nicely.
Thank you.
Right, is there anyone else wanting to speak on this? Okay, well, let's first of all see if anyone else members know.
It was just one question. If I could just have the location of the Bridleway, I'll pick it up separately outside of the meeting and try and get some answers.
Okay, did you hear that, Angie?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll look the email up.
Yeah. If you could share that with the other members, that would be, I think, useful. Could all have a look at it. Is that possible, Robert? Yeah, if you're willing, Angie.
Yeah, I've I've just got to hunt it out because it's from last year and it's not filed anywhere. So I'm hoping it's still sat there. But I know where the Bridleway is, so I could tell Chris that, but I don't know its exact number without looking it up on the definitive map. It's somewhere near Irnham.
Just the village name would probably help. I could probably work it out from there.
Yeah,
it's the west side of Temple Woods.
Yeah, I just make a point here that I'm not suggesting that we start picking up individual cases.
No, that was just
it's so that we can all get a grasp of the nature of these problems and to help us form a better picture of the broader picture.
Could I just mention one other thing there, which also is sort of related to what we've just been speaking about, and isn't necessarily anything we can do anything about at the moment. But when the definitive map was made in the 1950s, obviously all the parishes were asked to put down the various rights of way that were in their own parish and to define whether they were footpaths, bridleways, restricted byways, byways open to all traffic, green lanes, whatever they were. And we've got another one near us, and it's a restricted byway in the first parish, and then as it crosses the parish boundary, it becomes a public footpath. And a lot of people aren't aware of how this all started and why we are where we are now. But it was a lot to do with maintenance in the 50s of who was going to maintain the paths, who was going to use them. And now we find ourselves in this position where nothing really meets up, nothing really flows. And as I say, as a user, yes, it's hugely frustrating for us, but also we can also appreciate that from a county council point of view, particularly one in the situation where Lincolnshire, with a huge area, but a small population in relation to the area, which has funding issues in itself, there is only a finite amount of money that local authorities have to put to this. So much as we're doing a lot of work on our side to try and get these paths opened and joined up, we also understand why it's a long process from the other side as well.
Thank you. I think probably it's time to move on from that, but I hope we can return to it, particularly as the road is going to be reviewed, and we can have some input to that and monitor its progress. I'm going to move on now to item 10, permissive access, which is going to be a report from John Law. Over to you, John.
Thank you. Yeah, permissive access, obviously, we've still got some from the comments around the meeting at the moment, so that's good. But funded permissive access is likely to happen again. And in the past, we did have some real good routes, and the landowners, farmers did deserve funding for it. But we also had some routes that were not maintained. And again, we still paid for those routes to be funded. So what I want to do, or what I think we should do as a laugh, is to write to the Minister and to DEFRA saying what we hope would come from funding permissive access before they put in something that is very similar to the previous scheme, whereby it doesn't give us value for money. Just as a sideline, obviously the Wolds is an area of outstanding natural beauty, and they've already got the, if I can remember what it's called, the Farming in Protected Landscapes programme. They've got some examples there of encouraging farmers or landowners to change from stars to gates. However, looking at the Peak District literature, they're actually funding or giving opportunities to farmers to fund permissive access. So I just wonder why we should be so different from the Peak District to the Lincolnshire Wolds. And maybe if we have some contact in the Lincolnshire Wolds, maybe it'd be worth discussing that with them.
When you say contacts, what kind of contacts with who are you thinking of?
I assume it's similar to a board, is it?
You mean the advisory body for the?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll ask Chris to comment on that.
Yes, I mean the Lincolnshire Wolds is operated or run through a partnership agreement of which I manage. So me.
That's very handy.
In all seriousness, there is a joint advisory committee and a joint management group, which is the main funding bodies. So Lincolnshire, North East Lincolnshire, West Lindsey, East Lindsey, Natural England, Environment Agency and so on. The Joint Advisory Committee is a much wider body, which includes land ownership and other interests within the Wolds, CPRE and so on. So if you want to talk to me outside of the meeting, John, we can steer this in the right direction for you.
Yeah, okay.
Can I ask on the broader front of the replacement for the EU systems of funding for agriculture, which is all this is all part of, and what sort of consultation is the government doing over this? Because about funding permissive paths.
So you may all recall Michael Gove's announcements about public money for public goods, and it's wrapped up in that. So access isn't a standalone item in its own right. It's in with a lot of other potential public goods.
Has anything come through to you from the
There's been quite extensive consultations across natural environment and land management schemes across the board, local authorities. I don't think they'll have come down to local access forums though, but
if they come to the authority, they should come to the local access.
We're not asking the questions.
Yeah,
we're providing answers, so it's not for us to come to the local access forum. It's up to DEFRA.
Well, DEFRA will come to the county council.
Yes, but it's not our position then to come to the local access forum. That's not our role in that regard.
I don't understand.
It's not our consultation. It's definitely
if you're consulted on questions to do with countryside access, then you would naturally seek the advice of the local access forum. Is that what you mean?
Always see it that way now, but yeah.
But that's the.
If you request that of me, then we'll start doing that. But it's not something we've ever done previously.
It's written in. That's the purpose of the local access fund, as it's set up under legislation.
But it's probably one for outside of the meeting, Chairman.
I don't think it is.
Okay, fine. In that case, then our position would be that it's the government that are asking the questions of the local authority.
Yes.
If it's their consultation, they're asking for the local authority's opinion, not the local access forum's opinion. They're asking for
the local access forum. It's like saying it would be saying if it asked a question about, say, a housing building or something, it wouldn't ask its planning department. The council wouldn't ask its planning department.
But the government's as much a body for asking for the advice themselves as authority. You know, they would be classed as one of the bodies you could provide advice to. So we would normally expect them to come directly to you rather than via us.
No, because we're not here to advise the government. We're here to advise the county council or the local authorities within our area.
Okay, well,
that's written in the legislation.
We'll start passing through more bits and pieces then. we haven't done previously. We haven't done in all the time of the local access ones, and I don't think it's a national held position. But I'm quite happy to do it. I mean, it doesn't.
Well, at least we should be aware.
Just not something we've done
to make us aware of it. Would seem to be just. How does anyone else feel about that?
I think there's no reason why we shouldn't advise DEFRA anyway. We can do that, as I see it.
There's nothing to stop us writing to people, but
Yeah.
Our statutory role is to advise the county council, and I don't see why that should not be. Well, it seems to me just natural that if the county council is being asked its view on rights of way, it should seek a body which is appointed to advise it on rights of way, which is it's obliged to, in fact, appoint for that purpose under legislation. Right, I was hoping somebody else might have a view.
You'll get my response at a later date.
Thank you. Now, I'm losing my track of things now. That's yes, that's come out. John, you finished.
Yeah,
on that part.
I mean, what I would like to see, if you look at the highlighted paragraph at the end, is to write to DEFRA, advising them about what we found previously with permissive routes, both bridleways and footpaths, and
I think
also giving them the opportunity to see what we think would be a better way forward.
I think this,
but to circulate that for your comments.
This rather underlines my previous point, actually, because if one writes to a government department out of the blue, it's unlikely to have any effect or go anywhere. If the government department is consulting on seeking views on that thing at the time, then it is likely to go somewhere, provided the letter is directed to the right place. But if we don't know about it, if we're not being informed, then this will never happen. And putting our effort into writing it sort of out the blue to organisations that just might be thinking of having a consultation sometime isn't likely to be a very useful time of either use of our time or theirs.
But if we do nothing, it's even worse, isn't it?
But we might be doing something else instead. Anyway, we're in danger of repeating myself. And does anyone else have anything to ask John about? John Fawns? Do you have?
Yes, as a farmer, I'm very keen on permissive footpaths, and also very keen on reading what DEFRA say. But to date, we've not applied or seen very much funding or assistance for permissive footpaths. So that's just as a farmer's point of view. But in addition to the permissive footpaths, what's also needed is places where people can park the cars. Because we get lots of people come in and we welcome them openly where we are, but then there's nowhere to park a car. We've opened temporary car parks in the summer, but being told by the local council that really they're not welcome. You know, people, we shouldn't be opening fields for people to park in so they can access the footpath. You know, I don't know what people should do, but, you know, and not only the car parks, it's the toilets. You know, there's no infrastructure. It's no use just putting the footpaths there. We've got to help people with the infrastructure. That's all I've got to say, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else got anything on this item? If not, I'll move on to Countryside for All, which is John again.
Yeah, looking at this, in actual fact, I spoke about the tourist information centres that were closed, but there's also another one, Spalding. And it's a great shame, really, because really we want to encourage visitors back to the coast and back to certainly East Lindsey, but we can't do a lot about that. So that is just really the status of what's happening in terms of the Countryside for All leaflets. And we're currently sending them out to libraries, social prescribing and TICs or the TICs that are left. One problem is that we're always having is finding the funding for leaflets. And in the past we've had various grants from various organisations And Lincolnshire County Council has also supported us for some leaflets as well. But it's getting an even more difficult struggle as other things come to bear on, for instance, the lottery. So what I was thinking of was looking at private businesses sponsoring the leaflets, and I'm just wondering how that would be possible in terms of it being the local authority as well. I'm not sure whether you actually use sponsorship for grass maintenance, such as roundabouts in Lincolnshire and things like that. No.
Can I ask you, John, are we still talking about printed leaflets?
Printed leaflets, yes, because at the organisations or the events that I've attended with some colleagues, it's the printed leaflets that they're after more so than online. We'll tell them about the online opportunities, but it is the printed leaflets.
And how do people feel if, are we talking about people who just don't like to use online at all, or people who don't want to print things off? Because you can always have a leaflet you could print off yourself. How do people feel about that?
I can make a general assumption about that, to be honest, but I would say the way of encouraging people to actually walk or get out into the countryside is to actually show them something.
Yeah.
To actually expect them to go onto the internet and look at a route, it is less likely that they would do that.
Yeah.
So if they had something in front of them, something that
I can understand that. I am personally far from one of the people who says, oh, you can do it all online now. I think there's a great value in paper, but it's worth asking, because there is also a great value in the other way. I know lots of people who, and of course, it's much easier to keep things up to date. If anyone bothers, we all know there's an enormous amount of stuff online, which is appallingly out of date. But in theory, it should be much easier to keep them up to date than having to, than having to print a whole new leaflet. Yeah, all right.
So, yeah, is there any way we could explore an opportunity to get businesses to fund some of the countryside for all leaflets without causing any issues?
I can't think there's any reason why they couldn't sponsor leaflets.
Do we need to take it through your legal system just to make sure?
No, don't think so.
Okay.
I'm aware that I'm fairly certain in the Wolds team that some of their leaflets have been sponsored in the past.
Right.
I can't recall any of the public rights of way ones that we've dealt with outside of the Wolds have, but I can't think of any good reason why it wouldn't be possible at all.
Bear in mind, it does have the Lincolnshire County Council logo, etc. on it. Yeah, that's okay.
That should, normally we would look at our branding advice just to make sure that our logo is prominent in its appropriate position as much as anything. But if there are other funders, then certainly their logos would go alongside. I don't think there'd be a problem to that.
Councillor Carrington.
Yeah, just a tiny point. Again, I'll take Chris's advice on the legals, but I'm sure it would be all right. We're a pro-business council. But I was walking in the Wolds a couple of weeks ago, and it just struck me that the pub where we had lunch had an excellent selection of printed leaflets, which are also available online. So tourist destinations, start points, finish points, commercial organisation like local pubs might well be the kind of people who you can touch for a few hundred quid here, a few hundred quid there, and that can add up.
Thank you. And to go on the subgroup, can we look at approximately, if possible, £2,000 go towards the Lincolnshire County Council walk leaflets? So not the countryside wall leaflets, because at the events, when we did have events for the disabled and the elderly, they were all, that's wrong. There was a fair number of people that were interested in the normal Lincolnshire County Council walks leaflets.
In all honesty, John, I just can't say just at the moment.
No,
I wouldn't be at all surprised if the answer is going to have to be a no, I'm afraid, just because our budget levels are so small now. and we have to focus them on keeping routes available as best we can. As I say, we're at the end of the financial year, so I mean, when we move into the new financial year, yeah, we might have an opportunity, but certainly I don't have anything left of this year's to be able to fund anything.
Yeah. Could we then go the same way as the countryside for all routes and see if we could get business sponsorship for it? Okay, that's good. The next thing was miles without barriers. One of the major obstructions for people accessing the countryside, people that don't use the rights of way at the moment, is not knowing what's out there and where it is. Whereas previously you did have a system, CAMS, that would have been able to display this on the electronic definitive working map, I believe. So is there any way we could look at paying for a system like that? Not the laugh, I would add.
Okay, thanks, John. Yeah, there's a wider element to this. So previously, our accessible mapping online was driven through a third-party piece of software, as John mentioned, called the Countryside Access Management System, CAMS, which many authorities use. However, in Lincolnshire, it was at the stage where it needed greater development to meet modern needs, and I was instructed by my senior management to desist on the basis that I needed to incorporate the rights of way work into the work that highways were doing on their asset management work, which is what drove the mapping. Unfortunately, we're at the back of a long queue now. It would be for the forum to advise the authority in so many other ways that through written advice that they feel that this is an important area of work for the reasons that you outline in your paper. It might bump us along a little bit, but I do know that there are certain elements of it that are being stifled because of development in other areas of highway work, which are seen to take preference.
Okay. Can we actually do that then, Chris?
So I'm not clear what exactly.
Advise the council that we should hopefully take up CAMS. Oh, sorry, Chris.
Sorry, Joe. Just to draw you to attention, on page 17 of the report, it's actually the recommendation is for that.
Well, then we can.
Thank you. I think that's the end of me. Yes.
Does that require a resolution?
Yes.
Can somebody frame it? Can you frame the resolution?
Yes.
And we'll vote on it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, now we can vote on it now.
Okay. Well, what I was going to do was write something up and circulate it. Whatever.
I think you could actually possibly take a vote on the recommendation on page 17, which is why I've brought it to your attention.
I haven't got it on the right page. Can somebody read it out?
Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. The LAF advised the chief executive and relevant director or directors to fund the relevant version of GISIS, Countryside Access Management System, CAMS. This will improve information for the public to enable them to find suitable route to use, improve fault reporting, improve the knowledge of what structures are and where they're located, and improve the knowledge of where to fund improvements to maximise value for money and reduce physical barriers for members of the public with limited mobility.
Right, I take that as a proposal. So seconder, please. Yes, it's seconded by Sid Mill. And so could all those in favour please indicate? And is anybody against? Could they please indicate? Okay, NEMCOM, that's passed then. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm assuming that completes your report?
Yes.
So if we could move on to solar panels to receive a verbal report from Sid Mills, who's sitting in front of me.
Turn on. It's not a report, it's more of a question, but it'd be a long drawn out question. In Lincolnshire, we have to be careful what we wish for. The government has promised some delayed levelling up in the area with extra funding coming into the area. Apart from the many new housing developments, the need for oil has brought about drilling in the Lincolnshire wolds, and the need for clean energy has prompted many applications for solar farms. Now, Lincolnshire has a large area of good grade and scenic agricultural land that could be lost to these projects. Not all solar farms are in areas such as Fiskerton Airfield, which has low agricultural value and would only cover 173 acres. At West Burton and Cottam around Gainsborough, 7 solar farms are planned. The one at Dringley Hill alone will be 616 acres. Another project at East Heckington, a solar farm, will be 1,450 acres. And near Stamford and Rutland, a proposed solar farm will be over 2,000 acres. One of the developers, Island Green Power, have stated their panels will only be 27% efficient. Any project that uses panels should have the most efficient panels available, which obviously would require fewer panels. The panels have a lifespan of about 25 years and then they become ineffective. And at the stage, the companies could withdraw their profits, declare bankruptcy and leave taxpayers to pay for the removal of the useless panels. It appears that if you have the word green in your company name, your project will be accepted. I understand this is not a council decision, but a government one. But how much influence does the council have on any of these plans? A local access forum should be informed, if not consulted, because these farms have a big impact on the access we have to the countryside. And this is the same countryside the government are trying to promote people to use. What is the point of having access to a countryside if it means walking between rows of solar panels? And what is the point of having energy to cook food if you have no food to cook? My question is, does this forum have any influence on any of these decisions? And if not, what is the point of the forum? Thank you. Discuss.
I'm going to ask the other members of the forum to, if any of them, first of all, want to say anything on this before I ask any council. Is anyone indicating? Yes, Peter. Peter Hinton.
I think you're on mute still, Peter.
Sorry, missed the microphone tick. I was one of those chairmen of the parish council that was approached very early on about this particular project. Whilst having some sympathy with the farming community, the balance between generating energy in the country, food produce and the many other uses of our countryside have to be balanced. And I am only seeing one rather focused but very narrow view about the loss of farmland and not taking into account the necessity to reduce carbon fuel consumption and all the other factors. We're not actually getting a complete overview, and partly that's the government's fault because they don't present the argument in any way that's really simple to follow. But I have to say that I objected to the objections, if that's the right term, because I thought it was very, very one-sided. As far as this forum is concerned, yes, I have some sympathy. I've actually got the map on the other screen because I've been away for 2 weeks, but had to fend off a couple of emails on the subject for my parish council. It just comes into the border of our parish. And I was going to ask the question, what will be done to ensure that rights of way are protected, because it cuts across, it's a huge swathe of the countryside just to the south of where I am. And that's a genuine concern, and we should make sure that is protected. But to use lots of arguments to try and say, build it somewhere else, it's just NIMBYism without taking a much broader view of the needs of the whole country. So I'm afraid I've dwelt on this for some weeks now and tried to find out more information. I hear an awful lot of spurious comment. I mean, on one hand, somebody was convinced that giant national grid pylons would emanate from the site when there's no indication that that's true at all, and various other factors. Damage to the wildlife. Well, if you've ever been to one of these sites, and I lived in Germany for a long time, and I have to admit this is pretty huge, but I did see lots of very big solar panel sites, and if anything, wildlife prospered around them because there wasn't much else going on there, if you know, if you follow me. You don't lose all the land. It can be still be used for grazing, usually sheep, but a balanced view. Protect, by all means, protect all our byways. That's why we're on this, on this local access forum. But that's a planning consideration, and we just need to make sure that because it is a government decision, it is taken into account. There aren't that many rights of way that are interfered by the development of the site, by the way. It's not one huge area. It's actually fragmented across a chunk of the countryside. But it will be the largest one in the UK.
Yep, thank you, Peter. Does anyone else want to say anything?
Yes, please, if I may.
Just come back to you, Councillor, as come at the end.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to have something first? Which is he? Yeah, the two councillors I'll perhaps have at the end to sort of respond to this.
Can I just make a point that I'm not against solar panels? It's where they are sited.
Oh, I'm just going to,
and also rights of way. They look like they are being protected, but it does mean you are walking between rows of solar panels.
My concern is that although I think it's a very important concern and balancing the needs of food production and the very urgent need to produce renewable energy, etc., and protecting the countryside from its point of view of attractiveness. I think these are all very important things that we all care about, but I am deeply concerned that it's not what we're for. And if we start talking about sort of town and country planning in these sorts of terms, we could talk about everything and anything, and we would never really focus on what we're talking about. I just wanted to say that. Could I ask the two councillors, and I'll start with Councillor Carrington first.
Thank you, Chairman. I really wanted to begin by, excuse me, declaring an interest. I'm not only a member of the Planning Committee here at the County Council, I'm a member of the Planning Committee at North Stephen, which is a local planning authority, does from time to time get applications for solar panels and comments on NSIPs, the very big one, nationally significant infrastructure projects, of which we have 3 in or bordering Lincolnshire at the moment, one of which, as you've mentioned, is in North Stephen. So nothing I say should in any way prejudge my views, should I prove to have any, on anything that comes before planning. The only comment I would make, Chairman, is that this is a matter which arouses strong passions in every sense of the word. I'm not one who tells farmers what crops to grow, because I'm not a farmer. Electricity is a crop. That's just the world of these days. As far as we are concerned in this committee, and I take your point, Chairman, we are talking about public rights of way. Public rights of way should be always protected, and that should be part and is part of the planning process. So that should be hardwired in, whether it's dealt with at a national level with the very big schemes or with smaller schemes, and I've handled those in a professional capacity myself. You're always looking at the issue of public rights of way, but you are that's part of the planning process to protect, to seek to divert, to make sure that the amenities of the users of those paths is maintained and is not harmed by the scheme. I don't really want to go any further than that, Chairman, but I did want my declaration of interest to be noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, sorry, I've turned myself off. Here we are, Councillor, please.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, and I'd like to say I agree with what Councillor Carrington has just said. I am also a member of South Stephen District Council, but not on the Planning Committee, so I don't believe I have to declare an interest, despite the very large application for a solar farm, which is an NSIP, being close by to me. But it's not in either my ward or my division. Really, question I hope that Chris can advise on. I've been working on the assumption that if a solar proposal is large enough for it to count as a national strategic infrastructure project, an NSIP, that doesn't mean that the public rights of way are any less protected than they would be if it were a normal planning application for change of use of that land, or even for a solar farm that isn't big enough to be an NSIP. In other words, I'm basically asking, does the granting or the award of an NSIP can it contain within it public rights of way being extinguished? And is that any more likely than if it wasn't an NSIP? If is that clear? Have I asked that in a way that's understandable, Chris?
Absolutely, sounds clear. Yes, that's fine. So yes, so the larger planning issues, national strategic infrastructure projects, which are dealt with through the Secretary of State rather than the local planning authority. Just to provide some assurance, I am involved in all of those in terms of the rights of way lead, as well as some environmental lead as well. And so obviously the rights of way element is always reflected in our discussions back. So just to give an example, the work on the National Strategic Infrastructure Project at Boston, the Boston Alternative Energy Facility, affected the coast path or the potential coast path and a number of rights of way. And we've negotiated with the company building that to make sure that the rights of way are properly accommodated within the site and that there will be some improvements to those. In answer to Councillor Cleaver's question, yes, there is the potential that routes will be diverted or extinguished through that process, but we would always look at it in the same way as any other development coming to us from that, for example, a house builder. We would look to make the best of whatever the development is offering in terms of how that works with the rights of way and access in the area. In response to the paper that Sid's put in, we are developing an energy. I don't think it's going to be an energy policy as such as an authority, but certainly an energy statement. And it may be of worth for the forum to provide some advice to the authority about how we believe, or how the forum believes, the access element of the natural environment should be being looked at when we're looking at green infrastructure for renewable energies and so on, whether it be solar farms or wind or whatever. So that there is an option there for the forum. It wouldn't be normal for the forum to comment on individual schemes or rights of way, because obviously that's not the purpose of the forum. The forum is supposed to be acting on a strategic level rather than an individual basis. Sure.
Thank you. That's, I think, everyone's.
Can I just follow up on that?
Yes.
Just very briefly. So, although an NSIP can, if agreed by the Secretary of State, extinguish a public right of way, that's no different from the Secretary of State granting a planning appeal for anything that's not an NSIP. So the solar farms aren't in a different position to any other form of development where this is concerned, but also presumably, given the scale of these things, there is some opportunity for Section 106 monies to actually be channeled towards granting other rights of way and enhancing the ones that are already there within the area of outside the boundary, the immediate boundary of the solar farm.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, and we will endeavour to make those points when we're asked about specific sites. Again, just as an example, the Viking Link cable run was dealt with through development consent order through the NSIP process, and there were a number of diversions made, but we got better routes and better maintained or better surfaced routes than we had previously. So we'll always try and look to make gains where we possibly can. Definitely.
Thank you.
I'll just make a comment on that myself. I think that these kinds of developments, in my experience, the existence of rights of ways doesn't present a particular problem to the developers, and very often they are very keen to, therefore, to sort of fit in with providing some improvements and making things good, because it helps their image. It's not like safe house building, where perhaps keeping a right of way in what people think is a very good place and not moving it possibly means they can get one less house in, and that makes a big difference to the way they view things. I think of very few occasions where it might reduce the profitability of a solar farm by allowing, making an allowance for a right of way significantly. So I'm not too worried personally, but we need to keep watching them. Right, I think that seems to have dealt with that matter. Thank you, Jim, for bringing it up. Sid, I mean, sorry. And then moving on now to the last item before the date and time of the next meeting, which is forward agenda programme. I think this was actually my idea originally. And again, perhaps I'll say, I don't think anyone has put anything actually on the agenda or tabled anything, ideas for discussion, unless I'm wrong. But I would like the members to be proactive in saying what we want to be talking about and what we feel is important. Possibly what came from Angela, what came out of the discussion on the Rights of Way Improvement Plan might have the germs of some ideas. Does anyone else at the moment want to raise anything to discuss? We might be going to finish the meeting a little earlier than that. Well, if anybody does want to suggest something at any time, please do get in touch with Robert. No. In which case I can move on to item 14, which is the date and the time of the next meeting.
Did you want me to?
Yes, if you can, Robert, say something.
Okay, thank you. So obviously we've the forum must meet twice a year. Now we're at our spring meeting, so we've satisfied that request. So it appeared last meeting that the forum were hoping to meet more frequently. So I was going to suggest a summer meeting, something potentially in spring. I will send these dates out, but just in case anyone wanted to raise any early objections, I was going to suggest dates of either the 9th of June, the 23rd of June, or the 30th of June. Which should give a reasonable spread. They're all on Thursday at 2:30 p.m. So I tried to suggest times in the day. But again, if there are any changes to the general time or date that the forum would like to meet, please make them. Please feel free to suggest them.
Does anybody have any preferences?
Not a preference, Chairman, but just for information, I think the 23rd of June is part of the Lincolnshire show. Just saying.
Well, we can bear that in mind because quite a lot of people, especially councillors, I think, like to go to the show. Hopefully it will be COVID possible to have it in a normal way. Which is his indication is. Oh, sorry. Councillor Kern, can you speak, please?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Could you just repeat those three possible dates again, please? You said Thursday the 9th, and what else?
The 23rd of June, but maybe that's not the best. And then the 30th of June.
30th.
30th.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll send them out over email again, and maybe as you've all got time to check your diaries, we can agree something after the meeting.
Yes, and also perhaps to let the members who aren't present at the moment know as well. Well, I think that's everything, isn't it? I can close the meeting then. So thank you everybody for attending, and I don't think I've got any particularly to apologise for. Very often in these sorts of meetings one has to apologise for some sort of breakdown, but and again, well, so I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.